The pandemic and the recession tied to it has worsened America's political, racial, and socioeconomic divisions, but it's also motivated many to fight those divisions. This week, Representatives Barbara Lee and Pramila Jayapal introduced a resolution called the Third Reconstruction, which is designed to improve the lives of the millions of poor and low-income people in the nation. Now, among many things, it aims to update the way poverty is measured to reflect what a standard of living and a livable wage should be in this country. It also seeks to develop a federal jobs program that prioritizes those who need the help the most. For more on this, I'm joined by Democratic Congresswoman Barbara Lee of California. She's a former chair of the Congressional Black Congress. Congresswoman Lee, good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you doubly for joining us from California at this ridiculous hour. But this is a very, very, very important topic. We have structural inequality and poverty in this country, and it's always shocking to good-minded Americans to understand how many people are food insecure and living in a situation that sounds and feels a whole lot like poverty.
Well, good morning, Ali. I'm really happy to be with you. And I want to thank you so much for focusing on this issue of poverty, because the COVID pandemic has really shone a light on and exacerbated the issue of poverty. Poor people, low-wealth people, people who barely are surviving with $7.25 minimum wage. And so what we have seen during this COVID pandemic, it's unfortunate. It's really horrific. We are in a state of emergency in many respects. You saw middle-income people in food lines trying to get boxes of food just to feed their family, people who have never had to ask their government for anything. And so now you have 8 million more people in our country living below the poverty line. And I just want to remind everyone also that even before COVID, we had 250,000 people each and every year dying as a result of poverty.
So what is, I mean, look, I'm an economics reporter. Talk to me about what the legislative fix for this is, what you and Congresswoman Jayapal are trying to do. What can you do through legislation that can help alleviate some of this?
Sure, and thanks for that again, Ali. And you laid out some of the general parameters, but our legislation, and I have to just thank Bishop William Barber, Reverend Theo Harris, and the Poor People's Campaign and Congresswoman Jayapal. We've worked on this for a couple of years now. And what we do in this legislation, we have developed with the input of people who are living under poverty and living in a crisis every day, pathways out of poverty. For example, we must make the child tax credit permanent. We see right now it is lifting 50% of children out of poverty. We must increase the minimum wage to $15 to a living wage. We must provide for clean water in communities. We still have communities that have lead in their water. Just the basics to raise the standard of living we have laid out in our resolution, and we've laid out how we pay for it. And we've got to address the huge defense budget. We're calling for a 10% cut, which is just right now probably about $74 billion. That will help in many ways house the unhoused. And so we do have in our legislation ways and pathways out of poverty that the majority of people in our country would embrace once we put this resolution forward and have our hearings.
We are big fans of the Poor People's Campaign here on the show. We have Reverend Theo Harris and Bishop Barber on with regularity. And one of the things I always say to my staff when we book William Barber is that he's a man of faith, but he talks like an economist. He understands numbers and how it affects people. But part of this issue, when we talk about a basic minimum wage for people, you're right. People vote in favor of this, Republican and Democrat, and yet we can't get it done legislatively. What do we have to do to start to think that we can invest in the poorest among us, that the least among us not only are deserving of it, but they spend their money in a way that guarantees that the economy moves properly?
Well, we have to form, as Bishop Barber talks about, a fusion coalition. And I believe now, because of the Poor People's Campaign and millions of people who actually weighed in terms of this resolution are on board. And what we have to do is make sure that people hold their elected officials accountable. You can't tell me that making sure that everyone has access to health care is something that people don't want. And so this is a political struggle. And we have to make sure that and I have to tell you, Ali, in our resolution, many of the provisions have already been introduced as bills and are moving through the process. Some President Biden can issue executive orders. So we're working with the Biden-Harris administration to see where they can weigh in and issue executive orders. And of course, we have the political dynamics in the Senate with the, close numbers in terms of trying to get anything passed. But where there's a will, there's a way. And the people in this country are crying out for help. They're living on the edge. And we have a duty and responsibility to help those who have no money, who have no wealth, who have no resources, and just are barely surviving day after day. And again, the COVID crisis, it exacerbated it, but it also shone a light on the horrific conditions in the wealthiest and most powerful country in the world. No one should have to go to bed hungry or live on the streets in America.
And yet tens of millions do. Our efforts to eliminate poverty in this country will be a fulfilling of our promise to create a more perfect union. Thank you for the work you're doing on this front. Democratic Congresswoman Barbara Lee of California, working alongside Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal of Washington and the Poor People's Campaign. Thanks so much for this. We've